The following interview is a presentation of Ophion Media. My guest today is a world-class violinist and a towering figure in both new music and the music of the old masters. She started her career as a founding member of the legendary quartet Tashi and played with the illustrious Beaux Arts Trio for 6 years in the 1990s. Today, she remains a prolific performer. She holds the distinction of being an artist of the Chamber Music Society of the Lincoln Center, and she performs with the chamber ensembles Opus 1 and Trio Valtorna, both of which she co-founded. In addition to her many contributions as a player, she has also served as artistic director of the New Mexico-based festival Music from Angel Fire for over 3 decades, and she's the founding artistic director of the Bravo Music Festival in Vail, Colorado. As an educator, she's the Nina von Maltzen Chair in Violin Studies at the Curtis Institute of Music, and she gives master classes to young people and adults around the country quite regularly, from what I understand. So as you can imagine, it's an incredible honor for me to welcome Ani Kavafian to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, Adam. Thank you for having me.
I'm a huge fan, so you'll excuse me if I'm a little bit jittery, anything like that.
No problem. But you were very good at reciting all of the things that I've been doing in my life. So that was impressive. Thank you.
I wish I could take credit. I was just reading it off a document. But so I actually want to start, before diving into your career, start by asking you just some sort of background and biographical questions. Starting with your parents, I believe they brought you to the United States as a 3-year-old child, and they were also professional musicians in the Istanbul State Symphony, which I think that's where you were born also, Istanbul. So I wonder if you could reflect on them as people, and also say a few words about what your life was like growing up in their home and what kind of a role they played in your musical development.
Well, yes, amazing. You know everything. Yes, I was born in Istanbul of Armenian parents. Of course, that's important to say, because that's the reason that we did leave, and that's why my father emigrated to the United States and wanted us to grow up in a free country. So, you know, as you know, Armenians have been persecuted for many years, starting with the genocide over 100 years ago, and so there wasn't a moment where my dad decided that there was no way we could continue in Turkey, and that was in 1955 during the Cyprus riots, where there were riots and the police were coming to capture or arrest or whatever, gather up all the Turks and the Armenians and the Greeks in the area, and they came to our home, which was terrifying for everybody. I mean, I was only 3, so I don't remember, but my sister does remember. And
oh wow,
yeah, and so that was very traumatic. And what happened was we had a group of rooms on the ground floor of that house that we rented out, and there was a Turkish lady who knew very well we were Armenian, who came to the front and said to them, "Can't you see we're flying the Turkish flag. This is a Turkish home. There are no Armenians here. Go away," you know. And they went away, and I don't know who this woman was, but she might have saved our lives. But, you know, it was some very violent and difficult nights around that time. And it was about a year later that my father lined up a job in the U.S. and brought his family over. And I think it must have been, I just can't imagine the courage it must have taken to just leave his family behind and bring his 2 little kids and his wife to the U.S. But it was an interesting thing because everybody in my family played music. So when we got to the U.S. and there were kids in my neighborhood or in my school that didn't play music, I was confused about that because I thought everybody played music. My parents, my grandparents, you know, aunts and uncles. My aunt was a very famous piano pedagogue in Istanbul. anyway, so that's the story behind why we immigrated. So it was a very necessary but courageous thing, I think, that my father did.
It must have been an incredibly difficult decision for him.
I imagine. I know that there are a few things that my sister and I have from their years in Istanbul that they were able to bring over, and of course we treasure those things so much. But it was a difficult time, and my father actually passed away when I was very young. I was 11, and at that point, my mother, she didn't know how to write a check. She didn't know how to drive.
Oh my God.
She had to really take a crash course in being a single parent, and that was another indication of the strength and courage of the character of both of my parents.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. I wasn't planning to ask this, but do you still, I mean, did they maintain contact with any family in Europe?
I am in touch with my cousin and my cousin's kids. They still are in Istanbul and they're doing fine. We've had we had one of the most historic homes in Istanbul. It was the oldest standing wooden structure, and it was in a section called Bebek. And my family lived there for years and years, my father's family. And we all, it was a big house, and so we all lived there as communal, as European families often do. And my father's brother and wife and family, they stayed there after we left. But then soon after that, the Turkish government took it away from us and declared it a national historical landmark. And the good thing about that is that they're restoring it. And my aunt and uncle have passed, and so they don't have to endure the pain of not living in the house that they actually owned. As you can see, I have a little pent up resentment.
No, I mean, there's a lot of trauma that I think people often don't really get an outlet to process. So it's understandable. Well, before I guess asking you more about your background and stuff, while we're on the subject, I wonder if you would care to comment on President Biden's recent recognition of the Armenian genocide, which famously. Sorry.
I was just gonna go there. It's funny you say that. That's why that recognition that President Biden made of the actual genocide was such an important moment for all of us. We've been waiting for that for many, many years. And as much as I loved President Obama, that was something he never did. And everyone has avoided it until Biden. And I just think, of course, I think very highly of him as aside from that, but I think that was a very important thing to make that promise and then keep that promise was really vital for us Armenians.
Yeah, I was debating whether to say it or not, but you went there, that Obama famously made a campaign promise that he was going to recognize the genocide, and then left office 2 terms without doing it. So,
right. I mean, there are a lot of extenuating circumstances. Of course, the bases we have in Turkey, but I mean, there's no question that what happened, and we might as well say it.
Absolutely. Getting back to kind of your family life and musical life now. So your sister Ani, who you I think mentioned already once in this interview, is another extremely accomplished violinist. What was it like? I mean, well, I guess I should say, you've already sort of talked about childhood, but having a sibling relationship that's also a performer relationship, both from young age up till now, what's that like?
Well, I think that the age difference between us was very healthy. It was 4.5 years. So when you're, now that's nothing at our age. But when you're growing up, we were never in the same school. We never had the same friends. She was always more advanced musically and intellectually than I was. So we were not paraded around as a sister act. So that was another healthy thing. I think our parents really really made an effort not to do that, and so I think all of those things provided a very healthy environment and did not allow for any sibling rivalry. I'm very close to my sister, and she was a very, the only thing that we did do together. She played piano, so she was a very good pianist until she was about 15 or 16 years old. She did piano and violin equally,
Wow.
and I think she's the only person at Interlochen who won the concerto competition on two different instruments. She played a piano concerto, she played a violin concerto. So she's amazing, and she did play piano for me. So we reminisce about those times, because there was a time when she was accompanying me in a piece, and I was very young. I had just started playing, and I was fascinated with all the people in the audience. So I was looking around and looking for Grandma, and she played her tutti on the piano, and she came up to the place where I was supposed to come in, and I was still looking around. And she was like, she was so upset that I forgot to come in. And then I crashed in because I realized what was happening. So, I mean, after all these years, we just laugh about that. I mean, it's just something so personal and funny to us. But anyway, she did play piano for me, but we didn't play violin duets until we were well established as individuals many years later.
Yeah, that's a really special story. And now you continue, I would say, to be living in a musical household, because you're also married to a musician, the violist Steven Tenenbom.
That's right. Yep. Or you could leave an opening for my joke. You could say, "Are you married to a musician?" And then I say, "No, I'm married to a violist."
That's brutal.
Do you know that the interviews that Nick Kanellakis does? They're fabulous.
No,
Just
I'll have to check him out.
But please do. He's got a bunch of great interviews with amazing people. I think he's got Yannick on there, and just amazing people, and it's very funny. But anyway, that joke reminds me of that interview. But yeah, I am married to Steve, and we both teach at Curtis. He also teaches at Juilliard. I did teach at Juilliard for a while, but I'm concentrating now on Curtis, and he also teaches at Bard. He's a busy teacher, and then he plays in his string quartet, the Orion String Quartet.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be cool, to just be surrounded by that much music. So actually, my introduction to your work was with the amazing group Tashi, who I mentioned in the introduction, and who I'll ask you about in a little more detail soon. But I feel like I can't really go there without first asking you to reflect on Peter Serkin, because he passed away last year, I think in 2020. I understand that you two kind of really got started together and continued playing all the way through. So I don't have any snappy questions, but if you have any memories or reflections that you'd like to share.
Well, the first time we worked together, I was concertmaster of an orchestra he was playing with in Brattleboro, Vermont, at Blanche Moise's Bach Festival. And, I knew of him, of course, and he knew of me because just mutual friends. And we had fun playing, this little concert. And he, at that point, said, "Hey, do you want to read some music during the holidays, which were coming up?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm around. Sure." And he said, "You want to play the Messiaen quartet?" And I said, "Sure." I never heard it. I was like, I mean, the kids nowadays that are 18, they know the Messiaen quartet. I was 18 and I didn't know the Messiaen quartet. So I don't know what that says, if it's a different time or if it was me. But I said, "Oh, sure, let's read through the Messiaen quartet." And then I looked into it. I was like, holy mackerel, this is heavy stuff. So that's the way the Tashi group got started. But that was in 1972. 2 or 3, and we continued to play together occasionally. And in the more recent years, we had done a number of recitals together. We even had a Tashi reunion. I don't remember what year, whatever year Messiaen's 100th anniversary of his birth was. I don't remember what year. Maybe it was 5 or 6 years ago or something. Anyway, we had a reunion after many, many years of the original Tashi group. When he got ill, we did some recitals before he got ill, and then after he recovered the first time, and then we were preparing for a Beethoven cycle, the complete violin, piano, or the piano and violin sonatas, and we had started to rehearse them, and we were going to play them in a couple of places. Santa Fe Festival was one, and then he really, at that point, his relapse was he didn't allow him to do much of anything, and so it was he was such a huge part of my life, musically. I mean, the integrity and the intensity and the love and the for music that he had was just, I learned so much from him, so much, and I miss him terribly. I named my puppies Pete and Chick after 2 very important people to me that were just big parts of my musical life in 2 very different ways, but just very influential. So I miss Pete a lot, really a lot. I miss learning from him and playing with him. That was a rough one.
I'm so sorry. I mean, yeah, losing a friend of that many years. I at my age, I can't even really imagine. But
yeah, I remember when we first learned the Stefan Volpe sonata. So he liked to rehearse way ahead of concerts, right? So 2 years before we were going to play the Stefan Volpe sonata, we started rehearsing it, and we started it at 1/4 tempo. And so for a long time, we just played 1/4 tempo. Then we went to half tempo. And then we slowly worked up to, that piece freaked us both out. Just totally freaked us out. I think there's a recording somewhere, but anyway, he was very deliberate. And so that Beethoven cycle that we were supposed to do, we had started, quite far ahead of time. We had read through all of the sonatas. And I remember in the 10th sonata, the last sonata, he wanted to do turns after the trills. And I was like, really? I don't really like the turns. But when we made a deal to do the cycle, that's the first thing he said. He said, "Can we do the turns in the 10th sonata?" I said, "No, I don't want to." Okay, if that means you'll do the cycle, I'll do the turns.
Hilarious.
But anyway, yeah, he had, he said, just very subtly. They don't have to stick out. Just like. But there were so many things, and then he was using this hardbound copy of his father's that it must have been a very, if not a first edition, a very early edition of the Beethoven sonatas, and of course he had also taken the markings from a more from a Henley or a Barenreid, whatever it was, when they actually published a manuscript style, I mean, without any edits. He had marked all those things in, but he was still using that old, the pages were coming out and sometimes they'd fly around and we were quite yellow. But what a feeling to play from that music that was so historic.
Amazing.
Sorry, I went on for a while on that one.
No, I actually, by the way, like the format of my show, like long responses are good. So yeah, don't be shy. Okay. Yeah, I want to ask you a little more about Tashi. Did it feel back then like the work that you were doing with the group was something really significant? Because somebody like me looking back at kind of, if I can call it the history of 20th century classical music, it's like, oh my God, Tashi, like these guys were a huge deal.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if it it felt to me like it was a great experience, but I don't know that it was, I didn't take it to be, you know, as significant then as I do now. But, you know, not that many people were playing contemporary music in those days. So that was a big deal. But I do remember we had, you know, we always played the Messiaen quartet, especially the first several years that we were together. But it was always a struggle for the auspices to accept that onto their program, you know, and so it was like, no, we're doing the Messiaen. No, so we figured we had maybe over 200 performances of it, and after a while, we wanted to play other stuff, and then that's when the auspices wanted it with the Messiaen quartet. Messiaen, I said, well, we've been playing that a lot. But one of the other really significant moments was when we played the piece for Messiaen, and we were in New York, and I've always wanted to do a little article or write a piece on the direction and the comments that he made to us about playing his piece. One thing that struck me even then was he was so grateful that we were playing the quartet, and I thought, God, he's Messiaen, and we're just playing. You know, doesn't everybody do this kind of thing? And he was just a very humble and amazing musician, and he did give us some insights that were not exactly in the music. So that was good. And the other huge thing about that was Toru Takemitsu, the great Japanese composer, was present at that session.
Wow.
And so Toru that's what inspired him to write for us. And he wrote a quartet that could be played as a quartet or a quartet with orchestra. And we did that with Seiji Ozawa a bunch of times, and went to Japan a number of times and hung out with Toru. And he was a man he also died way too young. He was a man who we'd go out drinking, and I don't know where he put it, because I don't think he was more than 90 pounds, but he could outdrink anybody, and those times were so special. And then he wrote a concerto for me that I played in Japan and here, and some other works. We recorded a number of his works, but that was, I had to look back and say that was probably one of the real seminal moments.
Totally amazing. I mean, so you said two things there that I have to sort of ask follow-up questions on. The obvious one is Takemitsu, though, right? I mean, Toru Takemitsu, just this, maybe not physically as you just said, but musically, just this giant of a composer. And yeah, I think the concerto that he composed for you, I did a little bit of poking around on the internet, was called Far Calls Coming Far. Does that ring a bell?
Yep. That's the piece. He was a James Joyce freak. So a lot of stuff. The other thing that came from that was when my sister and I finally did play a duo recital together. Her husband, Bernie Mindich, produced it. He said, "You guys should play together. Let's have a celebration. I'll rent Carnegie Hall." So he rented Carnegie Hall.
Whoa.
And commissioned Toru to write a duo. And so that's another piece that is such a gorgeous, wonderful piece that he wrote for two violins, which just, you know, all this music that came from these experiences. It's just amazing. And of course, these pieces will be living forever, and to have a part in bringing them around I think that's one of the better things that I've accomplished in my life, or I've accomplished with my friends, my musician friends.
Totally. Super, super special. Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious too, what was he like as a person? I don't know if you knew him well enough to say, but.
Oh God, yeah, we hung out a lot. Out a lot. Yes. He was extremely soft-spoken, but very strong. And I remember when we were rehearsing his piece and we were recording it, and we'd ask him, "How do you think this place should go?" And he would say, "Oh, it sounds beautiful. It's just the way you're doing it is just so beautiful." And then we'd take a break, and we'd go out of the studio, and then he would sneak towards the piano and just play just a little bit, and Pete was like, "Oh, that's how he wants it to go."
That is so
So
funny.
when he was one of those, how some composers, it's their piece. He was like, he wrote the piece and then it became our piece.
Huh.
It's a very different, there are some, Corigliano is like that. When I played the sonata for him, he the first thing he said to me was, "Wow, you don't play it anything like my father did." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." He said, "No, no, no, you no, it's not my piece anymore. It's your piece. I love the way you're playing it." So, he could hear his piece in many different interpretations. Some composers are much more exacting than that, but Takemitsu, Corigliano, yeah, they. It's like a playwright who writes, and the characters are no longer his characters; they're the characters of the actors. It's sort of like that.
Yeah, that's gonna give me I think an opportunity to listen to his music with fresh ears. I never really knew that about him. That's fascinating.
Uh huh. It's fabulous stuff.
Totally. Yeah. What
Yeah.
a composer. And then I also wanted to ask, because you kind of alluded to this before, but you've always been a huge proponent of new music and someone who's kind of insisted on playing it. Is it always an uphill battle to get people to appreciate stuff that's unfamiliar, stuff that's challenging, or do you ever get a sense that audience members have come out looking for that?
I think it's different now than it was when I was in the heyday of my career and the Tashi career. I feel like there's a lot more interest and a lot more love for new music. I mean, I think it was we had a hard time pushing it on the sponsors, on the auspices, but it's I think it's a very different situation now. I don't think composers are appreciated enough, but
Mm,
they're appreciated a lot more than when I was younger. I think it
yeah.
has.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they're just artistically less conservative times that we live in. I don't know, but
Who knows? Yeah. See,
and oh, sorry, go ahead.
now I was just thinking it sort of has evolved into another kind of feeling.
Mm, yeah. I was also wondering if there are any either contemporary or older new music composers who specifically kind of have your attention right now.
Um,
It's fine if there's not.
nothing that comes to mind at the moment. I mean, I think there are some young people that I'm very fond of. I love the music of Chris Rogerson. And he was a student at Curtis, um, and now is sort of like a colleague. But I love his music. There's a lot of young composers at Curtis that have gone on to wonderful careers.
Nice, very cool. Let's see. So before really kind of diving in, even though it seems like we've maybe already done that, I just want to go back to one other thing that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned that you had named one of your pups Chick after Chick Corea, who most of our listeners will know sadly passed away a few months ago. So I want to ask you one thing about Chick as well. So for someone who I get the impression is, maybe I'm talking about you now, maybe not the biggest fan of going into the recording studio, you played on a few of his albums. You and Annie, your sister, and Fred Sherry of Tashi played on his album The Leprechaun, for instance. But I'm especially curious about the 1985 album called Septet, which, from the info available online, seems to actually have been recorded in Los Angeles, where I am now, in 1984. Because in addition to you playing all over this record, and I mean that in a very complimentary, positive way, you've got Fred Sherry on cello there. You've got Steven Tenenbom, your now husband, playing viola, husband of many years. I mean, I have so many questions about this. What was the session like? Were you married to Steven at the time? Is it the same kind of, when you're hashing things out in the studio, do you just trust Chick, or can you argue back about, I think I should play it this way? Like, so many questions.
Well, he was so I still can't say was, because it just seems so unreal. But he was he was not that comfortable in classical milieu, and so we'd play these tours where we'd play a Mozart trio, and he played them beautifully. But he always, I remember he thought that they should be right in time. You're not supposed to take any time in classical music. And I was like, no, it's okay. I think it's okay to do that. But there was always somebody terrified in the concert, because if he was reading music and playing Mozart, he was terrified. And then if I was attempting to improvise and not reading music, I was completely freaked out. So, I mean, those experiences it was so fantastic. Steve and I had not gotten together yet, and we got together on a Chick tour. And it was very soon after that. I mean, maybe it was even during the septet sessions. But, I just remember these tours, these epic tours. We'd go to Europe for like a month, and we'd play in like stadiums. I mean, it was so different from the classical tours that I had done for so many years, and just people trying to get into the concerts that were sold out by climbing in the bathroom windows, and,
No way.
and I mean, it was just insanity. And he was so generous. He was so incredibly generous. He always played the same tune, the Monk tune, Round Midnight. That was his thing. That was his piano. That during one section of the concert was a piano solo, and he played Round Midnight. I listened every night to him, and it was mind-boggling, because it was a different piece every night, a completely different work, and it just, for somebody like me who's so uncomfortable improvising, it was just like watching the master of the masters. I mean, it was just incredible. But that first album, Leprechaun, that was the first time he wrote for strings. So that was like the beginning. And I think he was introduced, I think Pete and Chick had a mutual admiration society. And so they hung out and loved each other's playing, of course, because both of them were just incredible. And that's how the Leprechaun came to be. And I mean, the people on that album, like Steve Gadd, Joe Farrell, Eddie Gomez.
Gomez, yeah.
I mean, it was just, I was like this the whole time, trying to play, and what an experience. And then that, of course, snowballed into all kinds of other things. And the septet came several years later. And then, for the 30th anniversary of my festival in New Mexico, and this would have been 7 years ago, I decided I was going to ask Chick if he'd come. And if you knew my festival, you would think I was crazy for asking somebody like Chick to come. It takes place in a little town, a little ski town with like 1,000 residents, year-round residents.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's beautiful, but it's very modest, but it's, we made great music there. I mean, over the years, it was just an amazing place. So I decided to ask him if he would come and be the composer in residence and write a piece and play. And he and Gail came, and he said, I can only stay a couple of days, and a week later he was still there. He was like, he loved it. He just loved it. And Gail, Gail sang, and we hung out, and it was truly a truly magical time. And then some, birthdays we'd get together and all of that, and we did a little birthday tribute last year, and then this year Carnegie did after his death, Carnegie did a memorial concert, and Gail asked me to do something, so Steve and I did something, and I had just raised these two little puppies. It was only two in the litter, and I had named them Pete and Chick, and I was holding Chick, and I said, "This is Chick," and then I talked about Chick, and they broadcast that. I don't know if it might be on YouTube. You might find it on YouTube. A bunch of
I didn't see it, but yeah, I'll look for it.
If I find the link, I'll send it to you.
Please do. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, that was, he was an amazing artist, just amazing. And I would say, we talked about improvising. He says, improvising is you make a mistake, and then you play the same mistake again as if you meant it as a real thing. And so there is no such thing as a mistake.
Right.
So if he did something that, went the wrong direction, he would take that and just go with it.
That is the direction.
Yeah.
Amazing. Really, really interesting and incredible artist there. So shifting gears a little bit. Actually, before I do that, I just want to ask a quick follow-up. The year that you invited him to music at Angel Fire, I think I saw something online that said he basically performed with what would have been a version of Tashi with him subbed in for Peter Serkin, basically.
Yes, because I invited Dick and Fred to come because it was Chick, and I thought it'd be a great reunion, and certainly Dick was very familiar with Chick. They knew each other well, and of course Fred was on all of the tours and albums that I did with Chick. So it was natural to invite him. There must be a recording of the performance somewhere. I'm sure I have it somewhere.
Nice. He
did this thing that was so fantastic. First of all, we sold a lot of tickets. Even in that little tiny town, people came from all over. It was Chick, and the place was packed. And he involved the audience. He had this way of okay, this group is going to do this, and then he would give them something to sing. Okay, this group's going to do this, and this group is, and then he would orchestrate the whole thing and put it all together while he was playing, and everybody was just screaming at the top of their lungs with joy. I mean, it was so fun, so fun.
Amazing. Talk about multitasking. That's serious. Well, so you mentioned a second ago that you thought that might have been recorded, which is actually a pretty good segue to the following question. I heard you say in some interview somewhere that you are really uncomfortable with the way that you sound on recordings. And that's so interesting to me because I'm just blown away by the albums that you've played on and the recordings you've made. So if I can pry a little bit, would you say a little more about that?
Well, I think first of all, my violin is difficult to record. So it's like far away, close mic and this and that. I think the only guy who really made my violin sound like it does in person was the producer Max Wilcox, who was the RCA producer and did all of the Tashi albums. And the one album that he did of the Beaux Arts Trio, I don't remember why he was doing that. He did produce one of our records. That's my favorite sound of the Beaux Arts Trio. Somehow he understood how to get the right sound. He was Rubinstein's producer.
Oh wow.
Anyway, so Max used to make make my violins. And there's something about it that's, I don't know, maybe it's kind of stringent or something. And anyway, he would make it sound really good. But I'm uncomfortable just playing in front of a mic. And you would think after all these years that I would be able to get over that. And I do tell my students, do you have to treat it like a performance? They say, but it's going to be there forever. And I say, well, it's just one moment that is recorded. But I'm not very good at taking that advice. So I feel a little uptight, and it's like the finding the right balance between making no mistakes but saying something. It's really a hard balance.
Yeah.
The older I get, the less I care about perfection. So I am getting a little less uptight about it.
That's good. I'd love to hear some more of your recordings, so I'm all for it.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, it's a hard medium, but we had a good time. I remember the last movement of the Messiaen, which is a violin and piano piece that is just excruciatingly slow and very, very difficult. I remember when we were recording the quartet, at the end of one of the days, and I was packing up, we had ended the session, and Pete said, "Hey, let's run the last movement." And I said, "Are you crazy? I can't even see straight. I'm so tired from all the playing we did." Because, some of those earlier movements are a lot of, there's a lot of force that you need to use. Anyway, so I said, "Oh, okay, all right." And that's the take they used, with maybe 2 or 3 splices.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And did you feel okay about that? Did you feel like it was a decent take?
I felt okay about it. Somehow, I think Pete knew that was, I would think that was a deliberate, like, this is going to be good because she's not ready for it or whatever. It was just he thought I'd be set up for a good performance of it.
That's so interesting, because you hear these stories about producers basically tricking musicians or bands by saying, "Oh, we're just going to do a warm-up thing to test the levels." Right. And then actually everything's already set up, and that ends up being the take. But it's funny that after you're totally exhausted and worn out and you've played it a million times, that's the take they end up going with.
Yeah.
Very funny. Let's see. I'm curious to ask you how you achieve, and I'm going to use pretty colloquial language, so bear with me here. But you achieve this musical state of sounding simultaneously free, but also like deeply, deeply in time. And I don't think I'm just talking about like rubato timing here. When I'm talking about pulse and freedom, because there's this other dimension that's like, in terms of dynamics, in terms of timbre, you're always like right there. It's sort of like a way of sitting in a groove or something. So I'm wondering, is this something that's just always at your fingertips, or do you have to get into a certain headspace before you're just like on fire musically?
I think that I learned a lot from my early experiences with Tashi. I really learned a lot. And I like to say, in the beginning, there was rhythm. And so rhythm is really important to me. And I never realized, I always thought my rhythm was decent until I played with Edgar Meyer and Wynton Marsalis. Those people have rhythm. That is amazing rhythm.
The total matrix, right? It's like nothing is at all out of place with those guys.
It's unbelievable. That's another big influence. The recording and touring with Wynton. Wow, I'm a very lucky person to have these people in my life. It's just, everything contributes to the fabric that is a person. But wow, I sure had some great experiences. And I have to say that the experiences came because I grabbed them, not because I planned to have them. And I think it's a mistake to plan to have goals, career goals. I think it's good to have musical goals, integrity and all of those things. But I think if you have career goals, sometimes you miss stuff that's might happen in the meantime. And I had people telling me, um, in the days that Tashi got started, you shouldn't do that. You know, that's going to be too big a career, and you're supposed to be a soloist, and so you shouldn't. You're going to get pegged as a chamber musician. And I was like, I don't think that's. I'm not nervous about that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I said, I'm doing this. This is a great thing. Um,
I'm glad
so
you did.
yeah, me too. And then it was the trio, the Beaux Arts Trio came at another kind of difficult time. And what was I going to say? No, of course not. And so I think you have to be ready for anything, because stuff gets thrown at you, and if you're like this, then you're not going to be able to experience all those things and benefit from them. So I truly believe that people should be open to everything.
Hmm.
But I don't remember what the context of this question.
I think
Oh,
you answered it.
rhythm and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
your sound, your sound. I mean, yeah.
Steve, my husband Steve, calls um, my sound the Ida Kavafian pissed off sound, and he means it as a compliment. So that's sort of well, this bow makes that the pissed off sound even more pissed off, and so it's a I guess there's a sizzle that he talks about, that I don't know. I think it's just an intensity of feeling about the music that makes it,
Hmm.
you know, makes you want to be extra alive. But that care and love for every note and purpose for every note comes way back from those Tashi days, from Peter and Fred and Dick. Just the kind of, just, you're totally immersed in the music in such an intense way that there's nothing else in the world that matters.
Totally. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Let's see. Speaking of your kind of progression as a musician, and as a musical professional, I also want to ask about your habits vis-a-vis practicing. First of all, can you describe them, and are they very different now from when you were really kind of learning the instrument?
Um, I don't practice enough right now. I can tell you that. During the year, I have very little time to practice because I have a lot of students. I play, and I rehearse and do concerts, but I don't do the same kind of practicing I did as a young person when I was, putting my foundation together. But I think the fact that I did do that kind of work earlier in my career has I've been drawing on that a lot. So there was a point, um, you know, another huge influence in my life was my teacher Oscar Shumsky,
Mm.
and I knew that he didn't tell me to get rid of my shoulder pad, which for people that don't know what it is, it's the device that goes under a violin on to hold up on your shoulder. But I'm of the school that thinks that it's more natural not to have anything there. So, but I used a shoulder rest until maybe age 19 or
Mm.
something like that, 20. Anyway, so um, one summer I decided, okay, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to get rid of the shoulder rest, and I'm going to go all the way back to basics. So one that summer was really an important summer. For 2 months, I practiced nothing but scales and etudes slowly, and totally redid my technique, because when you don't use a shoulder rest, it's a totally, you have to support more with your hand. And
Mm.
so it's a totally different technique. And I had to relearn everything. And so, in the third month, I added some Bach.
Oh,
And so that summer, I think, was a huge deal for me. It gave me, something to draw on, because the years since then, I haven't done that kind of intensive work. I
Amazing.
hated practicing as a kid. I actually like it now, but I really didn't like it as a kid, and I did some bad things to get out of practicing. Like I noticed, I mean, I think I was maybe 7 or 8, and I noticed that there was this piece of wood inside the violin, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. Maybe if I knock that down. So I took a pencil, I stuck it in my violin, I knocked the sound post down.
You did not. Oh my
I
God.
went, I went to my mother, and I was like, "It's something's in here. Something's rattling." And she looked inside. And she said, "Oh my God, it's your sound post fell down. You're not going to be able to practice. It's Friday. You're not going to be able to. We can't go to the shop because it's not open till Monday, and you
Oh
won't be
my
able to practice all weekend." And I was like, "Oh, this is terrible." But anyway, yeah, I did. I didn't like it, and I think in those days I tried to develop a way to practice that took less time. So thinking more and playing less, so that I could learn things more quickly and efficiently. And so I think that also is a. I actually for a while I was doing a practice seminar in different schools and places, just talking about practice habits and how to practice efficiently.
Mm.
Because I think a lot of kids just play, 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 play. They repeat, 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 and it might get better, but they don't know why it gets better, and then the next day it's worse again. And so I think good practice habits are really vital.
Yeah, I've in different interviews that I've seen, I've heard everybody from, you know, the bassist Ron Carter to the violinist Eudice Shapiro kind of talking
Oh,
about, you know, the importance of practicing efficiently, or, you know, practicing properly, not just getting your instrument in your hands and, you
yeah,
know.
yep.
Um,
Oh, Eudice Shapiro, she's a hero.
can you reflect on her at all? I wasn't going to ask you, but
I didn't know her well, but I think isn't she the one that she played piano just as very
oh,
well? Also, I think is that
I had
am
no
I thinking
idea
of the right
actually.
thing, the right person? But I mean, any woman of that age who accomplished so much is a hero to me. I remember also like people like Camilla Wicks,
Mm.
who was a wonderful virtuoso and specialized in the Sibelius concerto. And as a little kid, I went to hear the Detroit Symphony. She was playing a concerto. She came out in this gown and played just magnificently. And I remember talking to my mother and her saying, you know, you can do this too. It's just because you're a girl doesn't mean that you can't do this. Women can do just exactly what men can do. And, she was very forward thinking in that way.
That's so wonderful. Let's see. I want to backtrack to something that you mentioned maybe a few responses ago. Uh, just to ask you a question about the Beaux Arts Trio, because that was such an incredible group, and including and especially at the time that you were in it. I heard you say at one point that when you were a part of that group, you were basically like nonstop touring and rehearsing. Um, for our listeners who don't know, this was an all-star group, 3 completely world-class musicians, including Menahem Pressler, who, if I'm getting this right, I think was a teenager in Germany at the time of Kristallnacht, and his family fled Nazi
Led
Germany.
to Palestine. Yeah.
Right,
When
yeah.
it was Palestine. Yeah.
So, you know, pretty, I mean, I think harrowing life story there. And super intense. I mean, from what I understand, he kind of channeled all that trauma into music. So in all of this, my question is basically, given the concentration of musical talent in that group and musical dedication in that group, was that just the most intense musical environment ever? Like, what was it like playing with the Beaux Arts Trio?
Well, it was. It was very, very intense. I mean, Menachem he was sort of tireless as a worker, he worked and worked and rehearsed, and just toured. And I mean, he would sometimes come back from a tour to Europe or to Asia or somewhere and go straight to his studio to teach. without even going home. I mean, that's the kind of dedication and intensity, and that was great. It was also a lot to deal with, you know, and so he would, you know, if we played at Carnegie Hall, he wanted to have like a 4-hour rehearsal that day, you know, in Carnegie Hall, and so it was a very intense experience. It was a great experience, and playing those incredible trios with the kind of frequency that we did. You know, how many archdukes did I play? You know, that kind of experience is that you can't get that by practicing in your practice room. You know, getting up and playing in front of audiences like that night after night after night. Maybe you're exhausted, maybe you're sick, you're certainly jet lagged. It's just it's a whole other life. I mean, we played probably close to 100 concerts a year for those 6 years.
Totally insane. I don't
Yeah,
even.
and we recorded quite a bit, but we couldn't record anything that was too standard because the trio had already done most of those things. But I entered the group, and I mean, I got thrown to the wolves right away because my first experience was playing the Beethoven Triple, recording it, performing it with Mazur and the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra. That was my first thing. Like, okay, play the Beethoven Triple with the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra with Mazur and record it.
Sounds
So
scary.
yeah, I mean, I relish those kinds of challenges, but that was pretty intense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so another question that comes up to me, I mean, because you've played with these groups, you know, huge repertoires of pieces, you know, both as a soloist, as a chamber musician, concert master, et cetera, et cetera. What happens to this music after you play it? Does it permanently just kind of like live in your head? What is the relationship with all these pieces?
Oh, interesting. I would like to think that I don't play those pieces the same way now than I did even just a few years ago. I think certain things, certain basic things about the music remain, of course, but I like playing with different people because it, you know, it gives you a new perspective on maybe a piece that you've played many, many times. Like I'm going to play this weekend the Brahms G minor piano quartet, not with my piano quartet Opus 1, but with three other wonderful colleagues, Gilles von Sottel, pianist, and Paul Watkins, the cellist, and then Matt Littman, the violist. So that's going to be different from how I play it with my Opus 1 group. And I relish those experiences. And I think, you know, you don't want to change. The kind of changes you make can be very subtle, but very significant. You don't want to change the basic format of what you do with a piece, but there are certain, you know, certainly differences, like they might like a faster tempo or they're, you know, and then you go with it, and the piece becomes something else.
Mm.
Which is, that's what I mean. That music is a living thing, so I think that's natural that it would happen that way.
Yeah. So when you're gonna perform a piece, let's say you have or you haven't played it before, but you're getting ready to approach or attack a new piece with a group that you haven't performed that piece with them before, would you say there's any kind of set process that you go through, or it's all totally just up to the kind of moment?
I think it depends on your colleagues and how, you know, what kind of rapport you have with them, and the kind of, you know, if they certain there are I do have a DNP list of people I won't play with again. But it's not a very long list. But at this point in my life, like, I don't want to play with that person anymore, ever. And it's okay. But, like, give me an opportunity to play anything with Peter Wiley. I mean, and or Gary Hoffman, those kind of colleagues. I will go to the ends of the earth to play with those people.
Very cool. I mean, while we're on the subject of collaborators, I want to ask you about a few of yours. I'll start with Edgar Meyer, just because you already mentioned him.
I learned a lot from Edgar too, because he wrote those duos for Josh Bell and him to play, and we played a few of those. Oh my God, that stuff is tough. That is hard.
That's crazy music.
Hard. It's so hard on so many levels. Just the notes are so hard, and he plays like it's like there's nothing to it. But that was fun. That was fun doing those duos with him, because it was a great learning experience. And then now he teaches at Curtis, and some of my students play those pieces with his students. So it's kind of fun. It kind of, comes full circle. But Edgar's great, and I love playing with him.
Awesome. Yeah, that is. Sorry?
Any kind of music.
Right. Yeah, no, that is really very cool. I also want to ask you about your work and your relationship with the pianist Anne-Marie McDermott. You two seem to have such an amazing kind of conversational quality to your music when you're playing together.
Well, when Pete got sick and couldn't do the Beethoven cycle, the first place we were doing it was Santa Fe, and so Mark Nykrug, the artistic director, and I talked, and he said, well, obviously, if he can't do it, you're going to have to. It was 3 nights in a row, so it's really intense. 10 sonatas, 3 nights in a row. He said, obviously, you're going to have to do it with maybe 3 different pianists, and who are we going to be able to get, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, she's never going to be able to do it, but let's ask Anne-Marie. So she's the first person we asked. And at the time, we didn't know if Pete was going to make it, because he still wanted to, and he had canceled a lot of things, but he hadn't canceled that. And so, she was going to if she was going to be able to do it, she was going to be in the wings for a while. It just so happened that she had set that time aside, because she's a very busy person, but to just chill. And so, and it also happened that she could play all 10 sonatas, So, I mean, how many people could you count on to do that? But 1 or 2 of them she had never played before, but she was, and that was a great experience. And then we did it in Vail this last summer, which was a great experience, because that was like one of the only concerts anybody was playing. It was outside and socially distant and all of that, and it was my first time on a plane, and after all those months, but it was a great experience, and we loved it. And the way that our Opus 1 piano quartet started was after the trio. Peter and I said, we still want to play together. Let's make a group. What should we do? Okay, let's ask Steve. Should it be a quartet? A string quartet? He's in a string quartet, and then Pete joined the Guarneri quartet after that. But anyway, so we said a piano quartet, and then the 3 of us said, okay, we'll just tell Anne-Marie she's going to be in the group. She's our favorite pianist. We're not going to ask her. We're just going to tell her.
You decided for her. That's great.
Yeah. But luckily she was into it, and we've had some great experiences and some wonderful pieces written for us by just amazing composers. Steven Stuckey, Mark Nykrug, Roberto Sierra. I mean, it's just some great stuff. So there are a number of new piano quartets in the repertoire because of that group.
Excellent. I need to check some of those out. I actually haven't heard them yet. Let's see. I was going to ask you about Wynton, but we've already talked about him. I also wanted to ask about Gilbert Kalish, the pianist. I think through the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, you've had some interaction with him.
Yes, Gil and I have not played together quite as much as one would think. Just a few. I mean, it's been great experiences every time, but not that much. But I love Gil. I wonder if my sister's done more with him than I have. I'm trying to think, but I have tremendous respect for him, and I've loved playing with him. But it hasn't been a very often occurrence.
Okay, yeah, I saw one or two concerts where you both had your name on the bill, so that's why I was asking about that.
Yeah.
Let's see. I want to also ask you about your work as an educator. If you could just talk sort of generally about the importance or the responsibility of transmitting knowledge to the next generation. Because when I see the videos of your master classes, you just, I mean, I can't think of a better way to say it than that you seem like someone who's just so full of teaching, so full of sharing of information.
I started, let me see, I'm thinking, I started teaching at Curtis about 20 some years ago. So not that long if you consider how old I am. So I really came to teaching. I did some teaching earlier in my life, not, not on a terribly regular basis, but here and there. But I started teaching in earnest at Curtis, and I started there because of Jamie Laredo, because he's a close friend and a colleague, and he was, he travels a lot, and he asked if I could help him with his students when he was not able to see them. So immediately I had a studio that was, stellar because they were studying with Jamie. And then that sort of snowballed into my own thing. And so it was just, I love teaching at Curtis. The students are so amazing, and there's no, there's nothing in the way of them learning at Curtis because it's a tuition-free school, so it's not like, that was one thing that was difficult at Juilliard when I taught there was, a student could get into that school and then into another school, and then they would play the schools against each other for a scholarship, and there's none of that kind of BS when you're teaching at Curtis. And there are a few other schools like that. Colburn's a great school. I spent a week teaching there.
Very nice.
Yeah, I was really enjoyed it. And then Yale, of course, but that's more of a graduate school. But anyway, there isn't so the best students audition at Curtis, it seems. So, so I instantly, whoever I take at Curtis is going to be a big talent. And I had an amazing studio these last few years, and I always tell them, I say, look, I'm not telling you anything that's going to give you commercial success. I'm not good at that, but here's what I want you to pass down, and please promise me you'll pass down these tenets of music that I've learned from other people, starting with Shumsky all those years ago. And I just make them swear they're going to, keep it going, because there are so many people that are rewarded nowadays for the kind of playing that I don't respect. That kind of flashy,
Totally.
Doesn't matter what you do with the music. It's all about them.
It's all about the player and the ego, kind of, right?
Yeah, and I can't stand that, and I hate when I see that kind of playing win a competition, or so I just make my students swear that they're gonna pass down what I'm passing down, and it's not stuff that I made up. It's stuff that some of which I made up, but a lot of which came from some amazing musical influences in my life.
One thing that I heard you say during one of your master classes that I was watching, you made a comment, and I think this is a direct quote or quite close to a direct quote. You said to a student that if you thought about the music more and about your parts and instruments less, that actually makes your part come out better. And I just thought, like, what a beautiful observation, and what a great way of putting it. So I wonder how you were able to kind of attain that bird's eye view of the music as a player, because obviously, the concerns of like, oh, this hard thing is coming up, whatever, can get in the way, and also what young or up and coming players can do to develop that sense within themselves.
I some of the things that as an older person, you try to hammer into the young people, and it just doesn't work. Some of the things what's that saying? The teacher, the student, teacher comes when the student. I know there's something about the student has to be ready, and then the teacher comes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Exact quote. It's a quote that my husband says. When the student is ready, the teacher will come.
Right,
I think
right.
It goes like that. So it's like I could say things that I know are right and they're going to help somebody, but if they don't make it their own, it's not going to work. And some of them don't make it their own until long after you're not teaching them anymore. So I love, one of my favorite things is getting a message from a former student when they say, I finally got what you were trying to tell me. Here's how I'm doing it now. And this is what you tried to tell me, and I just couldn't get it at that time, but I really got it now, or something like that. I love hearing from former students. I used to, before I was using my iPad to teach, I would write in their music, and I sort of miss doing that because some of the students have contacted me, and I wrote some nasty things in their music with some nasty language, and so they, like, years later they're taking that piece out again to relearn it, and there's my scribbling dark pencil in their music, and it's usually laced with 4-letter words of some sort.
Whatever it takes to get the point across.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a wonderful place to teach, Curtis. I think we have everybody has their issues. Every school is struggling these days to incorporate our social issues in the right way and with the right balance, and Curtis is struggling with that too. But that's something that's I don't know, that's everywhere.
Yeah, I think so. I'm getting pretty close to the end of my questions. I've got 2 more for you if we're still okay on time.
Sure.
Okay. One, and hopefully this isn't like a redux of one that I asked earlier. But are there any composers of any era whose music you just have a lot of fun with or find really captivating as a player?
Well, what do I really, really like to play? I never used to like Beethoven when I was younger. And I have a dear friend who I had who was my sonata partner at Juilliard. His name is Jeffrey Swan, wonderful pianist. And I remember I used to say, I hate Beethoven. I just hate Beethoven. And I really didn't like it, but I think it was because I didn't get it. And when I finally got it, I started really loving it. And it's such a weird thing because I think in those days I didn't understand that the violin, if they paid attention to the left hand of the piano, would solve everything. Huh. So now, you see, it took me so long to learn that. And now I tell my students, but I don't think they're really going to understand it until they're older.
Yeah, until experience leads them to that understanding.
Yes, exactly. So the cycle I did a couple of cycles with the Anne-Marie of the Beethoven sonatas. That was a great experience. There's a recital that Pete and I did in Austin, Texas, and there's a video of that on YouTube. of the 6th, 7th, and 8th sonatas of Beethoven, and the set of variations. I guess, was it Magic Flute? I can't remember now. But that was one of the fun projects. We did that in a couple of places, and they did video it in Austin.
Beautiful, beautiful. And for my closing question, very appropriate that I think I just heard a dog drinking water in the background.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
No, because it actually is the perfect segue into what I was literally planning to ask you anyways, which is about your other life, not as a musician, but as someone who raises Vizsla dogs. Can you talk about, first of all, that practice, and also, have you always been a dog lover? Did you grow up with dogs in the house?
I did not grow up with dogs in the house, but not for lack of asking. That's for sure. I always wanted a dog. Annie and I both wanted a dog. My mother was never into dogs, and when I started having dogs, she fell in love with them. And I have a really great picture of her drinking a martini and trying to get one of my dogs to taste it. It's really cute.
That's hilarious.
But anyway, I didn't have them as kids, but as a kid, but I think I made up for it in my later life. So the first Vizsla I got was a surprise, and which is a terrible idea, but it worked out. It's a really awful idea, but I went to a festival in Nova Scotia, and Max of Halifax, the dog, the Vizsla, I just fell in love with this dog. And so I said to the owner something stupid like, oh, I wish I could have a dog like this. Or someday maybe I'll have a dog like this. So he found a puppy and talked the breeder out of this puppy by saying that I had a live-in maid and the dog was going to come on stage with me, and I was a fancy violinist, and the maid and the dog traveled with me. And anyway, so she allowed him to buy this puppy. And this was 35 years ago. And so that was my first one. And the reason I'm going into such detail about it is because this last litter I had, the two babies that I mentioned, Pete and Chick, one of them is going to my very first breeder from 35 years ago. And
no way.
Her daughter and family, they're going to share this puppy. So talk about full circle. That's right. Really cool. But, I do think that I try to get my students to get away from music a little bit. And maybe I think it's great for them to have other interests. And I know one of them I was talking to recently, and she was just feeling like she was in such a rut. And I said, just stop playing for a few days. Just stop. Mm-hmm. Go out and enjoy some nature. Do something, cook, do whatever you like to do, do it. And so I feel like the dog thing for me is a fantastic release. And it really gives me a great perspective on life and music. And I think I would go crazy without it. We have, at the moment, we have 3, and one of them is 15 years and 10 months. And so she's definitely a geriatric and requires a lot of attention. But the other thing I like to do is show them, and I like to do that myself. So I like to compete with them in conformation shows, and then I train them for hunting, and we do all kinds of things with them. And I find that it's the best release. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, like I actually had to call my Magyar friend, my Hungarian friend, to get the pronunciation of Vizsla.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. I used to. I learned a lot also from Janos Starker, the great cellist. Right?
Oh, no way! Oh, I should have asked you about him. Oh my God! Oh, well, just say it. I'm gonna include it in the interview.
Okay. Well, I have such incredible respect for Starker, and I loved his playing and his teaching and his whole being. And of course, being Hungarian, I would, every time I saw him, I would ask him to just say the name of my breed, because Americans, they say Vizsla, like SH, but right. It's really Vizsla. And the way that Starker said it was so beautiful, and it was like a work of art the way he pronounced Vizsla. It was just amazing. But that was it. He was a. I really enjoyed my work that I did with him. Uh, I invited him to my festival that you had mentioned in Colorado, and and then I wanted to play the Kodai duo with him.
Oh.
He was so patient to do that with me, but because God knows how many times he played, and with his son-in-law,
I have a recording of him playing it actually, so I know he's
incredible. Anyway, so I wanted to learn, from the master about that piece. So I programmed the Kodai, and wow, it was a revelation, really a revelation, and such a great experience. He started by saying, I don't like to play too loud. and then he played the Dvorak concerto with the orchestra. I can't remember which orchestra it was. Detroit, might have been Detroit. Anyway, and that was fantastic because it was outside, it was outdoors, and we had a mic on him. You could hear everything he played, and it was incredible.
Wow.
Because I don't think he didn't like to work hard to project, and so a piece like Dvorak was perfect. It was so amazing. So another great. When I think about all the people in my life that I've been privileged enough to work with, it's just amazing. I'm so lucky.
Truly. Yeah. Janos Starker, I had no idea. I guess I still am just totally obsessed with him. So that's very cool.
That's a good person to be obsessed with.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Well, Ani Kavafian, thank you so much for sharing your time and your story with me. It's really a privilege for me to talk to you.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed talking to you as well, and I'm flabbergasted at all the things that you know about me. It's just that those are things that takes a lot more effort than just reading somebody's bio. So I appreciate that.
Sure, you'd be surprised what's out there on the internet.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much, Ida.
You're welcome, Adam. Have a great rest of your evening, and hope to talk to you again.